Hi, Craig here, and welcome to episode 4 of season 3 of my tiny tropical garden vlog. And what a crazy couple of weeks it's been. 2 named storms, plenty of new blooms, and this 4-legged creature making our garden its new home. So in the 2 weeks that have passed since I last uploaded a vlog, the garden has been hit by Storm Kiara and Storm Dennis, both bringing with them gales of up to 60 miles an hour and amber warnings of rainfall. The stream broke its banks, the grass was underwater, and the garden, overall, took a battering. And the problem with strong winds where I live is nobody else is growing trees in their garden. So when the wind hits the walls of people's houses, it just kicks up a storm and has actually ripped the root ball of my Grisellenia shrub clean out of the ground. And this is why I think it's so important to consider trees as a windbreak when you're designing your garden. We're less than half a mile away from the sea, which is great. It's just a short stroll to the beach. But when storms do roll in, the air is full of salt, and when it lands on some of the leaves of my plants, it scorches them, leaving them brown and crispy. And this Rolldana has suffered the effects. However, it's still coming into bloom, which should give me some bright yellow flowers, which will be much appreciated at this time of year. I'm still undecided whether this plant's going to stay in my garden. It really doesn't like the salty air and the strong winds, but this is what gardening's all about, experimenting and seeing what works in your space. And besides, gardening would be boring if we got it right first time every time. We would just run out of things to do. Like I'm trying to decide now whether I stake up this Meli Anthes major, which is coming into flower, but does not like being blown around by the wind. Or do I let it flower and then remove it from the garden? Because, if I'm honest, Meli Anthes plants are a real flopper. Although the leaves are great for evergreen structure, and like I said, I really like that peanut butter smell, I just don't have the space for floppy plants in my garden. And it's frustrating because I like so many of them. I think I'm going to see these flowers through, and then I'll lift it and donate it to a friend or someone in my family. I'm lucky. It was only those 2 plants that suffered with damage from the storms. And while I was out in the tiny tropical garden checking for damage, I actually saw a few more blooms. So let me share them with you. This is the Primula that we bought in the first year that we had the garden. It was great for early colour, and the plant bulked out, and I managed to divide it and spread it around the garden. And each individual clump is now flowering, and I think the cultivar is gold lace. And the berries from last year's flowers on our cherry laurel windbreak plant are swelling, and I'm curious to see whether we get viable seeds from these. Although it's pretty easy to root this plant from cuttings. And just look how many flower buds there are, absolutely covering the plant. Now it's not the most exciting flower, but it's nice to see that your windbreak's going to provide some flowers too. And as you know, we are big on attracting pollinators and native insects to our garden. So underneath this Fatsia shrub, you'll see the purple flowers of a pulmonaria. This is a plant native to the UK woodlands, and I think it sits perfectly well in a tropical styled garden. And what surprised me last summer was with all of the exotic and tropical blooms that were out in my garden, the bees would bypass them all and land on this tiny, tiny flower. And look at those speckled leaves. If this was a rare plant, people would be going crazy for it. I think it's one well worth including in your garden if you want to attract some native wildlife. And this golden-leaved fuchsia genii that we moved a couple of weeks ago to this better spot is starting to bud up and come into bloom, which is pretty early, but understandable considering the mild winter we've had. And at this time of year, we are all sick of seeing people's pictures of hellebores, but I think they do earn their place, and when you look closely, you can understand why. They come in so many shapes and colours now, and I've been at the garden centre looking at possible other varieties that I'm going to add to the garden. I'll keep you updated. That variegated arabis that I'm using as a ground cover plant at the top of the stream is bulking out and just chucking out bloom after bloom after bloom. And the pollinators are loving this plant. They sit on these white flower heads from early morning throughout the day. And I'm sure at night these white flowers are attracting night pollinating insects as well. I'll have to figure out how I can start filming in the dark, just to show you how the garden looks once the sun has gone down. There are plenty of sure signs that spring is on the way, when the buds are starting to break out on our deciduous plants. This is the leaves of our Sambucus nigra blue sheen, which is lovely dark leaves and then dusky pink umbel flowers. And beside that is another dark leafed plant, a Continus cogigrea royal purple, or purple smokebush. And some of the giant leaved exotic plants are starting to wake up too, like this Tetrapanax papyrifera, or rice paper plant, which is a staple in most people's tropical gardens. You can't beat it for the size of the leaves. It's a really architectural plant. And when the leaves reach full size on this, I'm curious to see how they'll put up with the wind that we get in this garden sometimes. But again, time will tell. Let's just let it grow in the meantime. And my Persicaria roncinata is just starting to shoot from the ground, which I'm very happy about. As you know, we have heavy clay soil, and I do get worried that with wet winters like we've had, that roots of exotic plants might just rot away. But so far so good with this one. And if you're a subscriber, you'll already know that we're adding a new element to the tiny tropical garden this year, by growing lots of edibles in our exotic jungle. And I've taken delivery of 2 new plants to add to the edible parts of the exotic garden, starting with this cherry. It will be great for spring blossom, for pollinating insects, and I just love the idea of plucking cherries off of the tree in a tropical garden. And the second plant I've ordered is this brown turkey fig. Now this is the variety my uncle used to grow in his garden, and the fruit is delicious. I'm going to grow this fig tree in a large container at the end of the garden, because by restricting the roots you can encourage more fruit to form. And if you want to join me in growing an edible exotic garden, then I've put links to these 2 plants in the description for you below. And underneath the giant leaves of our loquat fruit tree is this begonia. This is a tropical begonia that's been outside all winter. And this is exactly what I mean about growing trees. Because it's under the evergreen leaves of my loquat tree, it's had its own little microclimate which has kept frost away, kept the sun off, and it just seems to be getting by this winter. I'll admit, I completely forgot to bring this plant in. I just missed it when I was bringing indoors all of the exotic plants at the end of summer. But it shows. It's worth experimenting to see what you can keep outdoors in the right spot in your garden. Go on, experiment, but take cuttings just in case you need reserve plants. Here's a new begonia houseplant that I bought, and having seen the success that I've had outdoors with that other one, I'm tempted to try and propagate this, dot it around the garden in the summer, and leave a few of the plants out over winter, just to push my luck and see what I can get away with. Like I say, this is what gardening's all about. Just have fun with it, break the rules from time to time. Oh yeah, and that jungle cat. I have no idea whose kitten this is, but it loves spending time in our garden, and I cannot sit down outdoors without it jumping on my lap for a cuddle. I never used to be a cat person, but I'll admit, she's a bit of a cutie. What do you guys think we should call her? And I've got good news and an update on that Streptocarpus houseplant that I almost killed in last week's video. After giving it a good drink, not only did the leaves recover, but it is budded up and is ready to bloom. I love these plants, they look great, they're easy to propagate, and I'm going to dot them around the garden like I did last year. I'll show you how I do this in next week's video. I'm going to take leaf cuttings and walk you through it step by step. So that wet winter keeps on rolling by, but you can see the garden is really kicking into action now, with buds on the branches and blooms popping up around the garden. It's really getting me excited for spring, and my gardening will have to move up a gear in the coming weeks. So hit that subscribe button if you want to be part of the journey, and hitting subscribe is the best way you can support this channel. Comment below if you've got any tips, questions or advice, and check out the website for more inspiration. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.